Hi, Bob.
Hi,
It's great to have you here.
great to be here.
Yeah, so today my guest is Bob Vanderbei. He's a professor in the Department of OR and Financial Engineering at Princeton University. In addition, he holds courtesy appointments in the departments of Mathematics, Astrophysics, Computer Science, and Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. He's also a member of the program in Applied and Computational Mathematics and is a founding member of the Bendheim Center for Finance. Beyond Princeton, he's a fellow of AMS, SIAM, and Informs. Within Informs, he has served as president of the Optimization Society and the Computing Society and is the 2017 winner of the Khachiyan Prize for his work in optimization. He also serves on the advisory board of the journal Mathematical Programming Computation. In addition to hundreds of research papers, he has written 4 books. The first one, a textbook entitled Linear Programming Foundations and Extensions, now in its 5th edition. The second one is Welcome to the Universe in 3D, an astronomy book written jointly with Neil deGrasse Tyson, J. Richard Gott, and Michael Strauss. The third one, Sizing Up the Universe, an introductory astronomy book written jointly with J. Richard Gott. And finally, the fourth one, Real and Convex Analysis, a textbook written jointly with Erhan Cinlar. Bob, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. It's really an honor to have you here.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Bob, let's start. So, you were born in 1955 in the US. From which part of the country do you originally come?
I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Right. Is it a small town, a big town?
It's either the second or third largest town in Michigan. Detroit, of course, is the largest, and I can't remember if Grand Rapids is number 2 or number 3. Lansing's the capital. I think so. Those are the 3 main towns.
Right. Do you come from an upper or lower class family?
um, Lower income, what do you call it? Lower middle income, I think,
Okay.
is is I think the terminology people use from when I was growing up. My dad didn't go to college. My mom didn't go to college. They were into sporty type stuff, but they weren't into academic type stuff. And I just liked learning the things that I was learning, and so it was a very different world for me. But no, they didn't go to college and didn't make a lot of money. When I was young, my mom didn't work. She was a stay-at-home mom. But then when I was in high school, I think she started working as an accountant to make a little bit more money. But we were kind of the lower side of the middle class, I think is what it's called.
Right. So, your father, he worked in a factory.
Yeah, we worked in a factory.
Uh huh.
Yeah, just putting things together, cook this to this, pass it on.
Got it. I've read somewhere that you have a twin sister, and this is not the only case in your family, right?
Yeah. I have a twin sister. Her name is Beth. My mom is a twin. She has a twin brother. His name is Fred. I have twin daughters. Their names are Marcy and Diana. And my twin sister married somebody who had twins from a previous marriage. So there's twins everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, are you different from your sister in general? I mean, in terms of interest and other things?
Yes, we are very different. By the way, I'll start this by saying I actually do think she's smarter than me, but she didn't go to college because when we were in high school, pursuing education wasn't, even though she was smart, that wasn't really her thing. It was more about having friends and stuff, just being more of a social person. And that, by the way, when she got older, did make some challenges in her life. But I can tell you, she's a very smart person, but she just was not into academic type.
Yeah. And growing up, what was fun to do in the Grand Rapids area?
Yeah, so Grand Rapids is in western part of Michigan, not all the way on the west coast, which is Lake Michigan on the west side of Michigan, but only about a 40-minute drive from Lake Michigan. And like even lower middle class people, everybody was into Lake Michigan. Everybody had a boat, whether it was a speedboat or a sailboat, whatever. That was just, I mean, and when I say everybody, I don't mean everybody, but that was the thing, a common thing. And so we had a boat when I was growing up. And in the summertime, if it's a nice day, we took the boat out every day. And we didn't keep our boat at a marina. That's way too much money that my parents couldn't afford. We just put it on the behind our car, towed it home, and kept it next to our driveway, and then brought it back out to the Lake Michigan, and we'd take it out and go to one of the beach areas where there's a sand dune. I'd climb the sand dunes. I love the sand dunes on Lake Michigan, and we'd cook dinner on the beach there. And having a boat, the other thing is everybody wants to do water skiing. If it's a speedboat, if it's a sailboat, you don't do water skiing. And this was the challenge for me is, and this is still true even today, my body doesn't like cold things. Cold air it doesn't like, cold water it doesn't like. And by the way, being from Michigan, I always tell people winter's just fine. Don't tell me it's too cold out. If you're cold, just put on another layer. Eventually you've got enough layers that you don't even feel the outdoor temperature. It doesn't matter what the temperature is. And so cold air, even though if I'm feeling it bothers me, I can adapt to that really well. But cold water is not so easy. And so learning how to water ski, where you got to get in the water and put on those skis and get down in the water and go, that was a challenge for me. And I hope you don't mind me telling you this story.
No, I don't.
When I was in graduate school, and I was at a party, a wedding party thing, a wedding weekend party at a place in upstate New York at a cottage on a lake, and all my friends there were like, "Let's go water skiing," and they're all doing it. And this lake is kind of famous for being really, really cold because it's a really, really deep lake. And so even in the middle of the summer, it's cold. And I go, "Oh my God, I don't want to go in there." But then I showed them a trick that I learned that I created when I was in high school. Rather than actually getting in the water and being freezing and holding onto the tow rope and saying, "Okay, let's go." No, I just walked out to the end of the dock, sat down on the dock, put the skis on my feet. My feet could fit into the water a little bit, just ankle deep. And I'm sitting on the edge of the dock with my feet on the water. And I tell them, "Bring me the rope." Leave some slack in it. And I knew how much slack because I'd done this many times because I started doing this in high school. And I gave them this go ahead on the throttle. They gave it full blast. I went and skied around and then came back and went really fast right up to the shore so I could just jump out of the skis and run up on the shore without getting wet. And that was kind of a thing that I did starting in high school. And my friends, my Cornell/RPI friends, were so amazed that one of the friends whose cottage we were at, she went inside the cottage and when I wasn't watching and filled a bucket with ice water and came and dumped it on me. And so that's one of my main memories of water skiing.
Yeah. I think that experience was probably not very pleasant, right? Of, having all that cold water. Yeah, but I understand the prank.
Yeah, and they all thought it was funny, and I appreciated how it was funny.
Yeah. You were not only into water skiing, but also into snow skiing. You even became a ski patrolman, didn't you?
That's correct. I started snow skiing when I was, I think, 3 years old. It's my youngest memory, actually. It is the memory of my youngest age. I remember kindergarten, a few things, but I was only 3 years old. And I remember it right now, like it happened yesterday. I'm at a ski area. This is in Michigan. We didn't go out to Colorado or something like that. This is a small little ski area close to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And they didn't have chair lifts and fancy ways to go up. You just had to hold onto this rope tow or tow rope, whatever it's called, and go up. But I was just a little kid. I couldn't do that. So my dad stands there getting ready to hang onto the rope, and he has me stand in front of him between his legs. And I'm holding onto his knees, which are up here like this. And he goes, "Okay, we're going to go now." And he takes me up like that. And I remember that ride up the hill like it's yesterday, because whenever you go skiing anywhere, there's little bumps of things. And those little bumps, which are only maybe about a foot kind of big, well, that was half my height almost. So, we're going up and down, up and down. And so I started when I was only a little boy. And my dad, by the way, was into skiing even when he was a kid or a young person. And he got my mom into skiing when they got married and blah, 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 blah. And we were members of a club. So this is not some large ski area. This is a ski club. It's just, I don't know how many acres, maybe 10 acres. I'm just making up a number, but it was just an area with 3 slopes, sort of a beginner slope, an intermediate slope, and an advanced slope. And that was it at this club. And we would go there in the wintertime every night in the winter. And they had a lodge, and I would just do my homework sitting in the lodge. And when I'm just bored with my homework or done with my homework, I'd go out skiing. So I went skiing pretty much almost every night, most of my growing up years in the winter. And then in high school, my mom decided to become a ski patrol. I don't know if we call it a ski patrolman. Lady. a ski patrol person, a ski patroller. I'm not sure what's the right word. But she decided that it would be fun to do that, partly because then she gets to ski for free. And because my parents were lower middle class, these kinds of economic kind of things were helpful, and it seemed interesting to her. And so it was kind of a combination of finance versus doing something interesting. And so she went through the coursework, and you have to learn how to become a medical, learn these medical certificates. I forget what they're called. And she became a ski patrolman. And I thought that was so interesting. I thought, oh, maybe I'll try to do that. And so I think in 11th grade, I did the coursework and all that stuff. And then in 12th grade, I was a ski patrolman for that 1 year. And then I went to college, and I could have become a ski patrolman, but college was in a different state, far, far away. And I was just busy with other things. I did still go skiing, but I didn't want to be a ski patrolman while I'm a college student. And so I was only a ski patrolman for 1 year of my life.
Very interesting story. And according to your website, you seem to have a great interest in snorkeling and tennis, right?
Yeah. So I got interested in tennis after 10th grade, I think it was. I was at a thing at a college, and one of the boys in the dorm was a tennis person, and he said, "Bob, come hit the balls with me." And he just dragged me, because he didn't have anyone to play tennis with. He and I were both at this like 3 or 4 week thing, and he brought 2 tennis rackets with him. And so he just taught me how to hit tennis balls somewhere after 10th grade. And I've been doing it all the time, frequently, ever since. I played for 2 hours yesterday. I played for 2 hours the day before yesterday. So it's a thing that I like. But another thing I'll mention to you, which I say to people all the time now, I don't care about winning. I don't even care about keeping score. I just think it's fun to hit the ball back and forth. That's what's fun. I used to hit it I used to take the tennis racket and tennis ball and hit them against my garage door at home just by myself when I played. I just like hitting the ball. It comes back to me, hit it again, run over there to get it. And I tell everybody, I'm just like a dog. Going, I want to chase after it.
Yeah. And what about snorkeling?
And snorkeling is also something I really love. And that's partly because I love beautiful things in nature. And being underwater and just seeing the coral reefs and all the fish and all the things and this is partly the fact that I like science and the beauty of science. It's a combination of beauty and science is what inspires me both at Astro World, which we'll talk about later, and snorkeling. It's just amazing. And I didn't do that as a kid, because in Michigan, even though we had a boat, as I already told you, I didn't like to get in the cold water. Even in the middle of the summer, Lake Michigan's not that warm. I mean, people from Michigan will think I'm kidding you, but from my perspective, it seemed not that warm. And also, there's no coral reefs in Lake Michigan. There's just sandy bottoms. So I never went snorkeling, I don't think, in Lake Michigan. But so now this is something that I developed an interest in as an adult here, living in New Jersey. And I haven't done it on the Jersey Shore either, but we took a vacation once to the Bahamas, I think it was, and the hotel we were staying at, I had encouraged people to go snorkeling, and you pay some money and they take you on this boat out to some reefs. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And that's what started it. And we've gone on many vacations. And my wife is from Thailand. And in Thailand, there's this place, an island, which is famous, called Phuket. And there's a whole bunch of smaller islands right next to Phuket called the Phi Phi Islands. And there's beautiful snorkeling there. And so we go to Thailand with some regularity, every couple of years on average. And whenever we go, I like, let's go snorkeling. Let's go down to Phuket. And so we've done that a lot.
Yeah, you're very active. That's very nice. And in 6th grade, you sold a painting to your school. How did this come about?
Yeah. So my mom got interested in artwork. I don't know how that happened, what triggered that for her. But there was a place in Grand Rapids where there was an instructor, I forget her name, and she ran a little art class kind of thing. And my mom signed up to be in this art class, and we learned how to do some oil painting. And she started this when I was in like 4th or 5th grade. I forget exactly what. And then at some point, I think when I was in 5th grade, or maybe early 6th grade, I forget exactly when I started, I said to her, oh, this is so cool. I'd love to do that too. And she goes, come on. So she took me with her and introduced me to the teacher. And the teacher also had classes for kids. And so I started taking the kids' version of the class. And the teacher liked me the best, by the way, at least my artwork the best, and encouraged me to join the adult class. And and it was really, really fun. And it was oil painting, and I made several of them. I have one of them hanging in my house even today, and my sister has a couple of them hanging in her house. And I don't remember how the kids in my elementary school heard about or saw my artwork, but a few of them did. I don't remember how that happened, but one of them, his name was Ted Huger. He was the main person of this thing called the Kenosha Chatterbox. Kenosha was the name of the school I went to. And Chatterbox was kind of something where it was like a newspaper. I don't know what it was, a thing where they would write stories about what's happening in the school. And he thought it would be cool if the Chatterbox, because they had some money from parents contributing to it, would buy one of my paintings and hang it up in my elementary school, Kenosha Elementary. And they did. And Grand Rapids Press, that's the newspaper in our town, heard that this was happening. And they came and took pictures of me being interviewed by Ted Huger, figuring out which of a few of my paintings they were going to buy from me and hang it up. And the Grand Rapids Press wrote an article about it, which, and this, by the way, happened in 6th grade, not in 5th grade, wrote an article about it, which appeared on the cover of the Grand Rapids Press. And if I remember correctly, and I might be off by one day, I think it was Christmas Day when I was in 6th grade, when I was 10 years old. I was on the cover of the town's newspaper. And so that was really fun.
Yeah, it seemed like a major thing, and it's quite impressive that you had a chance to sell a painting to your school. That's very unusual. And so I watched a video of you singing Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. Was he one of your favorite artists? What did you like to listen to in your early years?
So I like music. I've always liked music. Even now I like to sing, but I'm not going to sing right in front of you because I can't sing unless there's music playing. I can only sing along. And as a kid, growing up back in those days, everybody drove places and there was always music on the radios, and listening to what was the popular songs of that week is different the next week, is different the next week. And I liked all of the songs. I don't think there were any that I didn't like. It's true that there were some I liked more than others, but and I always sang along in the car. And the other people are just riding along and I'm singing in the car. I think my mom sang in the car a little bit also. And so that was really fun. And because I knew you were going to ask this, I did search my computer to see, what songs do I have? And I have about 200 of some on my computer that I can listen to. These are my 200 and some favorite songs. And I'm not going to read all of them to you. But I did write down the names of a few of the people singing that I liked, that are listed the most often in my 200. And it's Elton John, the Talking Heads, the Beatles, David Bowie, the Carpenters, John Denver, and Whitney Houston.
Okay, Whitney Houston, I was not expecting.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
Because it's not from that time, right? And I love the Carpenters. It's one of the best duos ever. And I mean, I like them very much. Yeah, very nice. Elton John is great and all of that. Wow. I mean, you grew up in a time where music was, flourishing. I mean, in terms of rock music, at least. I can totally understand when you say that there was no bad song on the radio back then.
Yeah. And then I think it was when I was a postdoc that the world changed. And there was this new thing that did not exist when I was a kid, which we now call rap.
Yeah.
And it's just people talking into a microphone with a beat, and telling whatever kind of funny story and it's called rap music. And when that became a thing, and it was started to hear this on the radio stations that I was listening to, I no longer liked listening to music in the car that much anymore. And for a while, I did discover there were some other new stations that did play more traditional music rather than the popular current stuff. And so for several years, I did listen to the oldie kind of radio stations.
Right, I understand. But now I understand why you started listening to Whitney Houston.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah. All right. And talking about music, it seems that you had a peculiar interaction with Bruce Springsteen somewhere in the 80s when you were already living in New Jersey. Tell me more about this unusual encounter.
Okay, so I can tell you multiple parts, but maybe I'll just stick to the one main one. When I first moved to New Jersey and I was playing tennis like I always do with some new friend that I just made a friend at Bell Labs here in New Jersey. We were playing tennis and I hurt my knee and went to see a doctor. Oh, we'll do surgery. They said it was a torn meniscus, which by the way was wrong. So I had to have 2 knee surgeries because the first one didn't fix the problem. But anyway, I got knee surgery. And after you get knee surgery, you have to go to physical therapy for a few months. And so I'm going to this physical therapy place in Red Bank, New Jersey. And it's a pretty big physical therapy place. And like lots of places, restaurants and whatever, if there's a famous person that's associated with that place, there's often a newspaper article saying, oh, this person goes to this place. And there were some of these things on the wall at this physical therapy place. And it said, oh, Bruce Springsteen goes here to work out before he goes on tours. And I go, oh, that's really interesting. And everybody knew that. And one day I'm there and everybody goes, Bruce is here. And I heard them saying that. And I go, oh, Bruce is here somewhere. I don't see him right now because it's a big place, but he's there. And then should I get up and show you what happened?
Yeah, please.
I was doing part of my routine, which was to lean against the wall. I don't know if you can see me okay?
Yeah.
I was to lean against the wall like this to get these muscles strengthened. And I had to stand like, or sit like this, whatever you want to call it, for like 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm doing this. And Bruce Springsteen starts walking along here. I go, oh my God, it's Bruce Springsteen. He walks right in front of me and he stops and he goes, and then I waved at him and I didn't want to interrupt him because I figured he's busy getting ready for his next tour. So I just waved at him and then he kept walking to wherever he was doing his physical therapy.
So I may describe this to the listeners who are not seeing this. You basically made a gesture that implied something like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is incredible, right? You had an interaction with him, a real interaction, but you guys haven't, said a word to each other.
Right.
Yeah. Fascinating. So you spent a good chunk of your career writing code. When did it all begin?
That began when I was in high school. And this is the 1970s, early 1970s. So computers were a pretty new thing. In fact, a computer, you had to use punch cards. Do you know what a punch card is?
Yeah, of course.
People know what a punch card is. In those old days, one line of code was a piece of paper, a card. Yeah. And you have 100 lines of code, you got 100 cards, a deck of cards. And you had to feed them into the machine. It would read them one line at a time. And the machine was this big thing, it was like on a table, or even some of them were sitting on the floor, they were so big. And these computers were nothing by today's standards, but they still were computers. They were still doing computation faster than you could do it just on pencil and paper. So it was the world getting more advanced. And I took a lot of classes, as we're going to talk about, I think, at the local junior college. Nowadays, we call them community colleges. And I took a computing class there and learned how to program computers. And funny part of this story is, so I think it was my senior year, and I'm sitting in that computer class at the community college. By the way, that college is part of the Grand Rapids school system. So it's a little local college, but you got 5 high schools and all the elementary schools and middle schools. This was all part of a system. And the offices that ran the system were right across the hall from where the computer lab is at the college. And at one point, one of the people who worked in that office came across the hall to talk to the person who runs the computer lab there, if somebody could help them write some code. And he suggested they talk to me. So he sent me just across the hall to talk to these people. And they said, Bob, we've got all these people that the town pays for, and their job, well, they have multiple aspects, but a big part of their job is to compute grade point averages. Because we have 5 high schools. There's I forget, 300 or 400 students, maybe 500, I forget. These are pretty big high schools, graduating every year per high school. And they were called secretaries back then, ladies who did the arithmetic, add up all their grades, figure out the average grade. And they said, they're just spending a ton of time doing this. They'd be more useful doing other things. And now there's computers that can do it. Bob, can you write a computer program that would do this for us in COBOL? And I said, I've never heard of COBOL. I don't even know what that is. And by the way, even today, I've never even seen or programmed in COBOL, even though that still exists.
Yeah.
And um, and I said, I just learned Fortran. I don't know COBOL. I said, but if you can send me, the data as a text file, I do know how to read text files in a Fortran code, and I'd be happy to write it. And they said, oh, okay, we'll just save the data out from COBOL as a text file. So they sent me the data. I wrote the computer program. I computed my code computed everybody's grade point average in all of Grand Rapids, Michigan in my senior year, and maybe even years later. I don't know how long they used my code. So it included my own grade point average, but I can tell you I did not put an if statement saying, if the person's Bob Vanderbei, the GPA is this number. And the proof that I didn't do that is in my senior year, I was number 27 in my class. I was not number 1.
Right. Yeah. So you did not cheat.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but having the experience to code in the early 70s is mind-boggling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I liked it. And then I kind of went off and on for some years. Some years I wouldn't do much or any. But then when I was an undergrad, I think I did take a computer programming course as an undergrad, machine language. It wasn't Fortran. And so I did kind of like this in an abstract way. And then later years, as I think we'll talk about a little bit further down here, computer programming became a big transition in my life.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So starting in 10th grade, you began taking several so-called advanced placement courses or AP courses in a sort of community college, as you explained, while attending a high school. How did that work?
Well, so AP classes were a thing. It was a new thing back then. Nowadays, you go to a high school and there was a zillion AP classes. When I was in high school, the AP chemistry class, which was the first AP class I took, was not even taught at the high school. You had to take a bus down to the community college because one of the teachers at the community college was teaching the AP chemistry class. Because AP chemistry as a high school class is considered equivalent to the college level introductory class. So getting somebody who teaches at the college to teach the AP class, it was fine for him and us, And so I took AP chemistry in 10th grade, if I remember correctly. And by the way, the first day of class, the teacher, who was my friend all my life after I met him when I was in 10th grade, announced to the class that he's teaching another course, not an AP course, a course at the college called Nuclear Chemistry. It's only 2 credits for the course, so it's a small course, and it's in the evening. It's not in the daytime. So he said to us, "You're all high school students, but if you can come down in the evening, it meets 1 day a week for a couple hours." And not enough of the students had signed up for it at the college. He says, "If I don't get more people, this course is going to get canceled, and I like it. So it'd be great if some of you could sign up." And so I asked my parents, and oh, by the way, that course I think only cost my parents $12. So even though my parents were lower middle class, it's not like taking classes at the junior college was not something that was expensive. And so they said, "Yeah, you can do that." And my dad was happy to drive me down and hang out downtown for a couple hours and then drive me home. And so I took nuclear chemistry, which was not an AP class, and the 2 AP chemistry classes. Those are things I did in 10th grade. And then in 11th grade, I took Calculus 1 and 2, AP Calculus.
And in one of those courses, you met a chemistry teacher who was very influential to you, correct?
Yeah, and that's who I was just mentioning. The guy who said, "Who wants to take my course, nuclear chemistry?" His name is Ron Edwards. He was one of the best, maybe the best teacher I ever had. He loved what he was doing. He loved nuclear chemistry. He loved chemistry in the broad scope. And he was the main, I don't know if that's the right words, but he was the popular chemistry teacher at the community college. And I can tell you lots of stories. I think it's on our list of things we're going to talk about. We were basically friends from then on until he passed away about 10 years ago. And he's just such a nice guy. And he has a son who's about, I think, 5 years younger than me, who I did meet when I was in high school. And that son was just a kid. But Ron Edwards, this was the teacher's name, Ron Edwards did invite some of his class students to his house for the holiday Christmas kind of thing. I don't remember what it was. I think that's what it was. Just to sort of be a social person. And so I met his wife and his kids at this thing. And so I met this son whose name is David. And David then did also go on and do chemical engineering and got positions at this place called Harvard University.
Not bad.
And he's come to visit me once or twice here in Princeton. So it's a nice world.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, it's nice that you stay in touch with him until he died, and you also stay in touch with his son, which is also remarkable.
Yeah. And I'll tell you maybe a little bit more. So I took the AP class in 10th grade, and then at the beginning of 11th grade, I went back down to his office at the community college and said, what do I do next? I'm now going to be in 11th grade. What should I do? And he says, take my sophomore level organic chemistry here at the college. So I took a year of organic chemistry, which is usually a sophomore college level course for chemistry majors, when I was in 11th grade. And then the summer after 11th grade, I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I liked him, and so I went to see him in his office again. Well, what do I do next? Do I have to take something at a major college, which they don't have one in Grand Rapids? And he goes, no, that's okay. I'll hire you as my lab assistant. And you can help teach the class to the sophomores. So I was his paid lab assistant. And by the way, we also did a little bit of a research project, which didn't lead to a published paper, but we did do a little bit of a research project that year as well. And funnily, my cousin, who's 2 years older than me, who is now a doctor, was in that chemistry class. And I was 2 years younger than him, and I was his instructor.
Nice coincidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you spend your summers during your high school years?
Yeah. So 9th grade, I discovered something taped on the wall in, I think, the library at the school, saying, there's a summer thing here. It's being funded by NSF, I think it was, and it's for chemistry type stuff. And I don't remember, I think it even explicitly said this is for 10th and 11th graders, but I was only a 9th grader. But I went to see a teacher and said, is it okay if I apply for this? And the teacher said, yeah, you can apply. They might accept you. And so I applied and I got accepted. And so the summer after 9th grade, I went to this place called Olivet College, which most people have never heard of. It's in Michigan, only about an hour drive or maybe an hour and a half drive from where I grew up. And it was like a 3 or 4 week thing doing chemistry at Olivet College. And that was the summer of 9th grade. And then in 10th grade, I found out there's another thing, that same kind of program, but it was to go to Northern Illinois University to do chemistry there. And that's where I started playing tennis with the guy at that place. And so 9th and 10th grade, summers after 9th and 10th grade, I was at those two different colleges. 11th grade, summer after 11th grade, I worked for my chemistry teacher in his lab at the junior college. And summer after 12th grade, I think I also worked in that lab, in the chemistry lab.
You really like to study. You went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, or RPI, in New York to study chemistry from 1973 to 1976. You received an RPI medal and got a scholarship. Thanks to that, you could study there. However, by the time you graduated, you realized you didn't want to be a chemist. What was the reason?
Yeah. So I went there because I won the RPI medal. And as I may have already said, my parents didn't really want me to go to college because they couldn't afford it. And just get a job when you graduate from high school. I won the RPI medal, which was a thing back then. I don't know if it's still a thing. And that made me get a scholarship. And it made basically going to RPI basically free almost. Not exactly, but close to it. And so it was a great choice to go there. And so I went there and I majored in chemistry, basically inspired by Ron Edwards, the teacher at the local community college. And so I majored in chemistry. And because I took a whole bunch of courses at the community college, not just chemistry, but calculus and physics, and even I took a year of English, weirdly enough. So I had a lot of courses. When I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I'll say RPI from now on, when I went to RPI, arriving, I got credit for all these courses. And so I had a year and a half of credit from high school. So I could graduate in just another 2.5 years, which you round up to 3. So 3 years I'd be graduating with my bachelor's degree. And so I was only a bachelor's student at RPI for 3 years, majoring in chemistry. And over the course of those 3 years, there were multiple things which made me realize I majored in chemistry because Ron Edwards was a great teacher. He liked to think about it. He liked the logic behind how this works. It wasn't just memorizing a bunch of equations like, oh, you mix this with this, and we'll call this reaction this, and it makes this. It just memorized thousands of things. And chemistry is now not quite like that. But back in those days, that's really what chemistry was, is just sort of learning what these chemists had discovered in a laboratory and given names to. And so just memorizing a whole bunch of things. And I've never had a really strong memory. It was always about the logic of things. And Ron Edwards, when he taught the chemistry stuff, for him, it was all about explaining the logic. Why does this chemical attach to this chemical? What is the physics about how these electrons behave? And that's what I liked. But then as an undergraduate, I realized that was only a small part of it. And it was more just about memorizing stuff. And I was, okay, I don't really want to be a chemist. And I was taking some math classes as well and liked the math better. And so then another story to tell is, so thinking about graduate school, I was thinking maybe I'll do something else. Maybe I'll go to math. I asked some of my math teachers, and they said, oh, if you apply to the really good schools in mathematics, you won't get in because you're a chemistry major. They accept math majors. But because you're did well as a chemistry major and you took a bunch of math classes, if you apply to these things called applied math, some of the good universities will accept you. And so I applied to a few of them, and I did get into Cornell. But anyway, before we get into that part of it, while I was going through this whole thought process, and I'm literally one day walking at RPI from one building to another, and there was another chemistry major who was basically walking the same path. And so he's just chatting with me as we're walking. This is like fall semester of my last year at RPI, and we're discussing what we're going to do next in our life. And he says that he's going to apply to law school. And he said, Bob, apply to law school. Don't go to math. Law is just like math. It's all about being logical and being smart and clever. and I don't even remember the name of this person, but this conversation did happen, and he did apply to law school and did go, but I don't remember who he was. But I didn't want to be a lawyer. By the way, I didn't even really hardly knew what a lawyer was at that part of my life, because growing up when my parents didn't go to college, I mean, I knew what a doctor was, but a lawyer or somebody, a CEO of a company, I didn't know any of these terminologies and stuff.
I'm also not so sure that the law is very logical.
Yes, I know. I agree with you, but he was making that argument.
Yeah.
And one of the other funny things is, as I was saying, I didn't like the chemistry classes as much in college. And one of the third semester of organic chemistry, I took the first two from Ron Edwards at the community college. The third semester of organic chemistry was taught at RPI, and I got a C in that class. And I was surprised, and I went to see the teacher afterwards, ask him, why did I get a C? And he showed me on a piece of paper, he made a little, histogram of the average grades of the students, from 0 to 100. And he goes, look over here. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but he goes something like this. Look, there's like 3 or 4 numbers here that are pretty high up. And then there's a gap. And then there's about 6 or 7 or 8, I forget the number he used, that are kind of close together. And then there's a gap. And then there's no gap. And so even though there was like 80 or 90 students in the class, he gave about 5 A's and about 8 B's and about 70 C's. And I wasn't in that top small group. And I was so surprised by that I asked him to write me letters of recommendation when I was applying to grad school so he could explain this whole story about how I got a C instead of a B or an A. Even though I wasn't applying for chemistry, but still, it did affect my GPA.
That was a very interesting strategy, right? Asking someone that gave you a sort of a low grade to kind of explain why you got that low grade and at the same time support you.
By the way, he reached out to me decades later, about 15 or 20 years ago. I don't remember why he reached out to me, but he saw my name somewhere, I think, and it triggered in his brain that I was that person. And he was still at RPI, and I'm here at Princeton, and so he reached out to me just to sort of say hi. He remembers that he gave me a C. So
excellent story. Incredible. And did you have any contact with OR at RPI?
Yes. So I don't remember exactly how many classes I took, but I do more or less remember that I only needed to take one or maybe two more OR type classes to get a master's degree. And so early on at Cornell, when I was a graduate student, I did take a couple OR classes that I could use to apply to RPI. So technically speaking, I have a master's degree in operations research from RPI.
Wow. Totally random.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Starting from chemistry, it's almost unthinkable, right? To
Yeah.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you ended up not following your friend's advice, as you told me. You did not go and study law, and you went to Cornell. So you arrived at Cornell in 1976 during Thanksgiving, and something funny happened.
Yeah. At Cornell. Yeah. It's my first year at Cornell, and it's Thanksgiving. Oh, everybody leaves campus at Thanksgiving and goes home. But I'm from Michigan. Cornell's in upstate New York. It's like, I don't know, a 10-hour drive or 12-hour drive to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'll just go back to RPI. That's only about a 3-hour drive, and just hang out with some of my friends there. In fact, I went to one of their house, one of my friends' house for Thanksgiving. But we met in a parking lot, and so I drive there. I get out of my car. They're all waiting for me there because I knew pretty much when I was going to arrive, and we're chatting just randomly. And one of my friends in this small group of people said, "Wow, how do you like Cornell?" And I said, "Oh my God, I'm loving graduate school. Ithaca is gorgeous." And my friend Bill Koch started laughing. I go, "Bill, what are you laughing about?" And he goes, "Bob, you just made a great pun." I go, "Oh, gorgeous and gorges." Because Cornell in Ithaca, New York, has all these steep things with water going down. These are called gorges. And I go, "Oh, I did. I was not doing that on purpose." And at the end of that Thanksgiving, for the next several years, living in Ithaca, going to Cornell, I said Ithaca is gorgeous all the time to everybody I knew because I just thought it was the funniest thing on earth. And then I think it was my 4th year as a graduate student where I went into one of the stores where I'd buy books and other things, whatever, random store to buy stuff, which is right there on College Avenue, right in College Town part of Cornell. And I saw there was a T-shirt and it said, "Ithaca is gorgeous." And I go, "Oh my God, that's so cool." Because I said it there all the time. And I wasn't friends with the people who worked there, but I kind of knew them because I went there probably once or twice a week for multiple years. I go, "That's really cool. They liked what I said, and now they're selling a T-shirt." And because I'm not a businessy type person, I did not walk over to them and say, "Give me credit. I want a certain fraction of how much money you make." I did not have any conversation like that. I just thought it was cool that they were using Ithaca is gorgeous on a T-shirt. And literally about weeks or a month after I saw it at that one store, it started appearing everywhere. All the stores in Ithaca, you could get a T-shirt that said Ithaca is gorgeous. And if you Google it right now, there's a Wikipedia page which gives credit to a marketing person whose name I always forget. He's the person who took that phrase and made it popular by telling all these other companies, make a T-shirt that says Ithaca is gorgeous. So the internet gives him credit, but the reality is my friend Bill Koch deserves the credit. He's the one who laughed. He's the one who realized that I'd said a pun, and then I should get a little bit of credit for then saying it 1,000 times.
Yeah, this is a surreal story, and I did some research about, and indeed the guy claims that he had come up with a name, but it's just very random.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob, what was your PhD thesis about?
Yeah. So my PhD was actually in probability theory, studying Brownian motion and stochastic processes, more general random walks, Brownian motion. My thesis advisor was Eugene Dinkin. He'd just been hired. He left the Soviet Union and came to Cornell literally in my first year. And so I was his first PhD student in the United States. But he was literally one of the most famous probabilists in the world back in those days. And so I was really thought it'd be great to do probability with him as my advisor. And he said yes, even though I was in applied math, not pure math. So I was very happy about that.
Right. So nothing to do with OR, right?
No, not really. Well, probability is kind of OR-ish, but this was very theoretical.
Yeah. Right. It's a little to do with OR then. And you have an interesting anecdote involving your PhD advisor. Do you mind sharing it?
Yeah. So his name's Eugene Dinkin. He is from the Soviet Union. And he came to the United States. And as I said, I was his first student, but there was he had a few other students in the course of my years there. And he would take us out and go for a walk, show us how to pick mushrooms, because Russians know how to do that. Take us a walk around the Gorges, actually, because he loved Ithaca as well. And on one of those walks, he said to me and the other 2 or 3 or 4 students that, we can call him Eugene Dinkin, but that's really not how it's said in Russia. And he wanted us to practice how to say his name in Russian. Yevgeny Borisovich, Eugene's Boris. He had us practice many times. Bob, say Yevgeny Borisovich, Yevgeny Borisovich. Say it 20 times. And so I had practiced like that, and the other few students did the same thing. And then he always worked at home. I mean, he had an office in the math department at Cornell, and he did come to it, and he didn't teach his classes, but just when he didn't have to be there, he did most of his work at home. And so you'd have to call him up at home to make an appointment to go chat with him. And that was the standard thing. And so one day, after that conversation, I called his home phone, and like probably more than half the time, he didn't answer it. His wife answered it, and she answered the phone. And I said, "This is by Vanderbei. Can I speak to Yevgeny Borisovich?" And she just laughed for like 5 minutes. She couldn't stop laughing. And so that's my favorite memory of saying Yevgeny Borisovich, was her laughing at me saying it.
Yeah. So Bob, did you do any internship during your PhD years?
Yes. So I worked as a summer intern at Citibank in New York City for 3 summers. Summer after I graduated from RPI, so the summer before starting graduate school, and then the next 2 summers. And it was in the business world. And I, at some point, realized that I really liked the pure math much more than just, what do I need to do to make $1 billion? Which actually wasn't how they were expressing it to me, but that is kind of the business world. Because the summer internships that I had there weren't really that logical. They were just sort of doing stuff. And the funny story that I like to tell people is, one of those summers, I think it was the second summer, but I'm not sure, my advisor was a lady, and she liked what I was doing, and she liked the fact that I was at Cornell and was a good student there. And we had a conversation with me one day saying that, her background really isn't in that direction. She's more just a businessy person. And she goes, "Bob, there's one thing I've never understood, and I'm wondering if you can explain it to me. What is a negative number?" And I was shocked that she said that. What? Are you kidding me? And to this day, I'm not even sure. Maybe she was just kind of being socially funny or something. But she didn't say it like she's trying to be socially funny. She said it like it was a real question. And I go, you got assets and liabilities, one's positive and one's negative. You take these, you subtract those. And so I did have a brief conversation with her about it, but I was pretty surprised that she even asked me that question. Then when I was, my third summer there, my advisor there, who was not that lady, it was some other person, he said to me, "Bob, you don't have to go back to Cornell." And this is like in late July or early August. "Bob, you don't have to go back to Cornell. You can stay here in New York City. We'll hire you full time." Now, he didn't make me an official offer. He just said they would make me an offer. And he estimated what that offer would be like. And it was 10 times greater than what I was getting paid as a graduate student being a TA in classes. But as a TA, I could afford life. I had a car. I lived in an apartment. I could afford food. I could afford my life. Why do I need 10 times more? And so I thought about it for about 1 millisecond. And I said to him, "No, thank you. I love math. It's what I want to do with my life." He was okay with that. And that was the last summer I worked there. Well, for other reasons, future summers, there were things I could do at Cornell in the summer.
Yeah. So I decided to pursue your passion and not the money at that stage, at least. Yeah. So while living in Ithaca, you also found time to be a glider flight instructor, which is rather surreal. Another surreal story. So tell me more about this.
Yeah. So actually, I didn't become a flight instructor until a little bit later, but I did start flying gliders while I was a student at Cornell. It was the summer after my third year. And so you have to take an oral exam in the spring of your third year. It was considered a 3-hour oral exam. And if you don't do well, you have to just get a master's degree and go somewhere else. And so that's kind of a stressful thing for graduate students. And pretty much every university has something like that. And so I did well on that. And now it's like early summer. And I spent like months preparing for that 3-hour oral exam, which, by the way, only went 20 minutes. That's another interesting, we might not have time for that. And so now I'm just sitting in the math department social area. And every day they had a copy of the student newspaper. And I'm or was it a magazine or newspaper? I think it was the newspaper, just reading news. And there was an article in that newspaper about the soaring club in Ithaca. It's not part of the university. It's just a club in Ithaca, but there were some university people who were members of the club. And so there was an article about it. And I go, oh, soaring. I'd never heard of soaring until I saw that article. And it was interesting. And I have a car, and the airport that they were flying, it was just a small airport. It was only a grass strip, but I looked up where it is. It's only a maybe a 10-minute drive from Cornell. And so I just drove out there one day and said, can I get a ride? And they go, yeah, we give rides. And how much is it? $15. I go, okay, I can afford that. And so they gave me a ride. And I thought that was really fun. And I said, how much would it cost to learn how to, get a license to fly? And they said, well, you have to do, on average, 20 flights with an instructor, and then legally 20 flights flying solo by yourself. And then you can go up with an examiner to get your license. So about 40 flights, about $15 a flight. I multiplied that together, got, I think, about $600. I go, oh, it's not cheap, but I can afford that. This is really fun. So I spent that summer after my third year. If it was nice weather, the instructor and the tow pilot, the guy who flies the plane that tows us up, those people had jobs. And those people had jobs. The jobs back in those days usually ended at 4:30. And so, if it's nice weather, they just drive out to the airport and start either flying themselves or giving rides to members of the club from about 5 o'clock until maybe like 7 o'clock. And then if the weather was nice, you could go pretty much any day. And so I went many, many times, and just over the course of that one summer, I got my license. And so for the couple of years I was at Cornell, I continued to fly every summer, but then I didn't get my instructor's rating until I was a postdoc at University of Illinois.
Yeah, so water skiing, snow skiing, snorkeling, tennis, gliders. It's unbelievable.
I like the
Yeah. So, Bob, you earned your degree in 1981, and then you went to NYU for a 1-year postdoc in probability, followed by a 2-year postdoc at the University of Illinois in probability theory, right?
That's correct. Yeah, those are my 2 postdocs.
And I think the second one seemed to be more interesting for you, right?
Yes. I was hoping to stay at the University of Illinois forever. I was recruited to go there. And by the way, as a probability person, and as I said, my thesis advisor at Cornell was Dinkin, who was considered one of the few best people on earth at that time in probability. And one of the other small number of best people was a guy named Joe Dube, who was at University of Illinois. And so even though University of Illinois is not an Ivy League school, or it's not Stanford, or however you want to say it, I mean, it's a good school, but it's not one of those schools. If you wanted to be a probabilist, University of Illinois was really a great, great, great place to be. And so I was really happy to go there, but it was also a little bit interesting because they offered me a 2-year postdoc. I did have a tenure track assistant professor offer from Northwestern University, which is also up in Illinois. But that was in the engineering school there. And I thought of myself as more of a pure mathematician, even though technically speaking, my degree was in applied math, but my thesis advisor, Dinkin, was in pure math. And so I wanted to be in a pure math department, not in an engineering school part. And so even though Northwestern's a really good school also, they were giving me a tenure track assistant professor position. University of Illinois was only offering me a postdoc, but the person who recruited me to Illinois, which wasn't Dube, but was a younger person, told me, he goes, we'd like to hire you as an assistant professor, but we don't have an assistant professor position to offer this year. But if you come here for 2 years, we probably will have something either next year or the following year. And then you could apply for that. And because you're really great and you're already here, we'll just convert you from postdoc to assistant professor. And so based on that advice, I go, okay, I'll do it. And so I accepted that. And then a year or two, I forget which one it was, there was a position. They did interview. I was on the list. I did make it to the list of there were 80 applicants. I made it to the list of 15. And then they cut it down from 15 to 5. And those last 5 would then be invited to give a lecture and be interviewed by people in the department to see which one of those 5 would get the offer. And funny thing is, I had an office mate. Like everybody at University of Illinois, because it's a big university, even faculty have office mates. Even tenured faculty have office mates who are maybe postdocs. And so my office mate was he's only like 6 or 7 years older than me, was a recently tenured faculty member there. And he was on the search committee. And so he told me some things, which at the time he was not comfortable telling me, but I think decades have gone by. It's okay for me to say this. He told me, he says, you made it to the list of 15, but when we cut it from 15 to 5, each member on the committee had a vote, rank everybody. And he goes, 3 of the committee members ranked you number 15. And here's why. You're really good, but you're already here. And that would look bad if we made you the offer, which is completely the opposite of what the guy who recruited me said. So I was disappointed that it didn't turn into a permanent thing. But as the story, as we're going to continue here, goes on, my life did go in a good path, but it wasn't the path I was hoping for at that point.
Yeah, I mean, we from the OR community are really glad that you didn't get that job because we benefit a lot from that. And in 1984, you were hired by AT&T to work at Bell Labs. How did the opportunity come about?
Yeah. So in 1984, this was at the end of my University of Illinois period. I'm on the job market. As I recall, there was a recession that year or a thing. There weren't that many opportunities, but there were a few academic positions. I'm not going to name the names of the few colleges that I got offers from, because it's a little bit awkward since I said no to them. But I had 2 friends from graduate school at Cornell who got married to each other. And because they were married to each other and they were both wanting to get good jobs, that was a hard thing to do. But it's still a little bit of an issue. It's still an issue today. It was a huge issue back in those days. So to get 2 people in academic position at the same university was almost impossible back then. And so they went to Bell Labs here in New Jersey, which is part of AT&T. And Bell Labs was considered a good place to go. And so Beth, the wife, contacted me when she knew I was looking for a job and said, Bob, apply to Bell Labs. We'll hire you. They invited me to give a talk and they made me an offer. And even though it wasn't academia, it was still Bell Labs, which is considered a really good place.
Come on. It's still Bell Labs.
So I said yes to that. That's how I got started.
Yeah. So there at Bell Labs, you had an office mate who was an optimization person, and not just any person. And that ended up being a turning point in your professional career, right?
Yeah. And this is one of the most interesting stories of my whole life. When I arrived at Bell Labs in their OR group, and I was hired to do applied probability, not theoretical probability, helping with queuing theory models for how to run the telephone network. But I had an office mate. Office mates make a big difference in lots of stories, as already come up. And my office mate was a guy named Rob Garfinkel, who at the time was at the University of Tennessee. He's now at University of Connecticut. And he was well known in the optimization world, not in the probability world, even though both of those are part of OR. And so that we were in the same department. He was just doing different things.
He has this book with George Nemhauser, right?
Yeah, Garfinkel and Nemhauser, integer programming book. So he was a well-known person. He was on sabbatical from the University of Tennessee, and he went to Bell Labs. Bell Labs was a good place. He didn't have to go to a university. So he was my office mate. And literally weeks or maybe less than a month after I arrived, there was an event that everybody in the optimization world was talking about. A new discovery, a new invention from a new person named Narendra Karmarkar, who had just been hired at AT&T in the Math Research Center, which was not the same place as the OR group that I was in. It was at a different building about almost an hour away, still here in New Jersey, but different building where the Math Research Center is. And he had just published a paper with a new algorithm for optimization polynomial time algorithm. And everybody was excited about it because he said that compared to the standard algorithm, which is the simplex method, his code was like, I forget the exact numbers he was using, but 20 or 50 times faster than the simplex method on pretty much all the time. And this completely amazed everybody because in the real world of business, every company on earth is trying to optimize what they're doing. Now, maybe a lot of companies don't really know enough math to actually have tools or to use tools that are mathematically set up. But lots and lots, thousands and thousands of companies hire people in the OR world to help them run their company in an optimal way. And so there was this market for optimization tools. And the simplex method was the thing that had dominated that market for many decades. And now there's a new algorithm, and it's going to be a new thing. It's going to dominate the market because if it's 20 or 50 times faster, everybody's going to buy this. So this appeared on the cover of magazines and newspapers all over the country. This was a thing. But I was a probability person, so it wasn't a thing that I was paying attention to, even though I heard it on the news. But my office mate, Rob Garfinkel, he goes, Bob, this is so amazing. We're going to start a reading group and read Karmarkar's paper and understand the algorithm. And we're here at Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey. He's at Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey. So he's not going to be part of our reading group because he's not going to drive an hour multiple times a week just to chat with us. But we're going to read his paper. We got optimization people in this group. There'll be maybe like 10 of us. I don't remember the exact number. We're going to read his paper. And he goes, Bob, you might as well join us in reading this because the fact that you don't know much about the traditional algorithms is irrelevant. As long as you know what it means to maximize or minimize a linear function and that you can write down some linear inequalities, that's all you need to know because everything else is new. And so I started going to the reading group and we read his paper and we're analyzing it. And we came up with a variant of his algorithm and I ended up writing a paper with two of the other people in that group, Mark Mechanican and oh God, I blank on his name. What's his name?
Barry Friedman?
Barry Friedman. Barry Friedman, I've not kept in touch with. So this is 40 years ago. And Mark Mechanican is still a friend of mine. And so the three of us ended up writing a paper. And the story about that is Barry Friedman was the one who suggested this variation of Karmarkar's algorithm that we liked. And I was the one who did most of the mathematical analysis. But Mark Mechanican interacted with me a little bit about the mathematics, but Barry Friedman didn't interact about any of the math. And Mark Mechanican was also pretty good at programming. So he wrote code to make sure these things work and are doing what we thought they would do. And we ended up writing a paper. It's a published paper. It's one of my fairly highly cited papers. And so that's when my life made a transition from probability to optimization, which is mostly what I've been doing ever since then.
Right. So the title of the paper is A Modification of Karmarkar's Linear Programming Algorithm. It was submitted in 1985, June 1985, and it was published in November 1986.
Yeah.
So that was your very first paper on optimization. And I must say, quite a debut. So it was about affine scaling. People were at that time were trying to come up with alternative versions of that, right? So,
yeah. I mean, everybody in the optimization world was completely obsessed when this Karmarkar thing came out there. And there was all kinds of different papers in different directions. And Karmarkar's algorithm was provably polynomial time, but the affine scaling variant of it, even to this day, has not been proved to be polynomial time algorithm. But it is in practice as good as Karmarkar's algorithm.
And soon after submitting that paper, you got your hands on the original code by Karmarkar himself, and you seemed quite surprised by what you found.
Yes, this is the main part of my life story. Yes. So after the three of us wrote that paper, and AT&T was all excited about this, going to change the world. They were going to create a commercial product, and they were calling it Corbix, which stood for Karmarkar Operations Research in a Box. Because they were going to sell not just the code, they were going to actually sell computers. Because parallel computing was kind of a thing that was starting to become a thing then. And so they were hoping to be able to make computers and this software that every company would buy this, and this was going to make billions and billions of dollars for AT&T. This was something they were excited about, but this was just the beginning. It's just Karmarkar's paper, and then the paper that I wrote with my two co-authors was all that was really out there. But so they started a group to pursue this, and I was the first person hired into the group. My boss, I think his name was Steve Chen, and his boss was Bruce Whitaker, and Bruce Whitaker is still a good friend of mine, still lives here in New Jersey. But I was the first person hired to be part of this initial team. And by the way, the first summer, they only had approval to hire 6 people, even though this was going to change the world. But initially, it was just a 6-people thing. And the other 5 besides me were just sort of to help kind of debug the code or just run the code, just do stuff. But my job was to interact with Karmarkar and to actually get the code that he was using and make a commercial product out of it. And I don't, because this is so long ago, I don't remember if I drove up there or if he drove down, because we were working an hour apart, or if he sent it by mail. He might have actually just sent it by mail, and it just took a couple of days. He sent it on a little floppy disk kind of thing or whatever. But he sent me the code, and I have the code, and I'm down here at Bell Labs in Homedale. And by the way, I had a computer at home as well at this time in my life. So I had his code, and I compiled it, and then I would run it, and it would crash. Pretty much every time I ran it, it would crash. And at some point, I called him up on the phone, and I said, Narendra, it keeps crashing. What am I supposed to do? Why is it crashing on your computer? And he said, yeah. It crashed on his computer too. He said, well, how did you time this to compare it to the simplex method? And he said, well, as you know, which I did know, when I run his code that he wrote in Fortran, it wouldn't just take a file and run and give you the answer. No, it asks you questions. You want to do this, 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 you want to do this. And the answers to those questions, the default answers were sometimes yes and sometimes no. And this was written in Fortran, so you couldn't write Y or N for yes or no, or at least, maybe smarter people could, but he didn't, being just a Fortran numerical person, he did not know how to have Fortran code see if you typed a Y or an N. So the answer was either a 1 or a 0. Every question, you just hit the 1 or the 0, 1 or 0, 1 or 0. Bunch of yes/no questions. And you're probably thinking that yes is 1 and no is 0, and that is actually incorrect, which he did, by the way, explain to me before we had this phone conversation. The default was 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Whether the obvious default answer was yes or no, it was just easier if you could just keep going 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then if you want to do something unusual, hit the 0. So he told me, well, you just ran this and it crashed on iteration 12. Well, at the end of iteration 11, it said, do you want to save the current solution? And usually you hit the 1, which means no, hit the 0, which means yes. Save the current solution. And then run the code again. He said, and as you know, it will always ask you at the beginning, do you want to load a previously starting point, previously saved starting point? And instead of saying no, say yes, hit the 0 to say yes. And then it'll start again. So it'd be 1 or 2 crashes almost every time, but eventually it would get to the optimal solution. And so how did he time this? It's not just running this thing. And the way he did it is he put a timer just on one subroutine, an n-cubed subroutine. The factoring of a matrix, square matrix, factor it to a lower triangular times upper triangular matrix. And that's an n-cubed algorithm, and that's important in this whole thing. He says, he just times that one subroutine, and that's the most computationally intensive subroutine, so he ignores the rest of it. And then he knows that on average, even though it never goes from beginning to end all by itself, it takes on average about 20 iterations. So he just took that number, multiplied by 20. And that's what he did over and over again on like 50 different problems. And that's how he got his estimate of how it compared to the simplex method. And so I go, oh, that's really weird, but okay, I understand what you're saying. And I spent the next month of that summer, 1985, fixing his bugs. And by the way, it wasn't just one bug. It would crash different ways because it would give kind of some message of what's going wrong. So there was more than one bug, not 100 bugs, but a few bugs. And I spent that month of my time that summer to get it to work. Now it works. It runs end to end. And now I can just use a regular kind of timer for a piece of software, see how long it takes. And so I ran the same 50 or whatever it was sample problems that he had and compared the times I got with the times we would get using his method of just multiplying that one subroutine times 20. And I discovered that he was way, way, way exaggerating the performance of the algorithm for a couple of reasons. The main one is that even though it's true that that one subroutine is n cubed, the important thing to understand is these are sparse matrices. N cubed is much bigger than n squared when n is a big number. But if you're talking about a sparse matrix and it's n cubed, well, that third n is not really n. It's just how many non-zeros are there in the column of that matrix on average. Oh, that's 3. And so a subroutine that's n cubed might only be 3 times worse than something that's n squared. And if you're calling this n squared algorithm a lot of times, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so I made this code and it worked. And by the way, his algorithm was still good, but it wasn't 20 times faster all the time and 50 times faster some of the times. No, it was like 5 times faster some of the times, 2 times faster kind of on average, maybe 3 times slower some of the time. On average, it was faster and noticeably faster, but not dramatically faster. And I went to my boss, Steve Chen, and Steve went to Bruce Whitaker, and Bruce Whitaker went to his boss and told them that these things, and went all the way up to the top of the university, sorry, not the university, Bell Labs, AT&T. And the person at the top invited Karmarkar to his office to chat with Karmarkar to explain, what are we going to do about this? Because we were going to make a huge business out of this. And Karmarkar explained to that person at the top that, yeah, and by the way, he made his n-cube algorithm, that one subroutine, he made it really fast. And he didn't try to modify the n-squared algorithms to make them faster than just kind of the default obvious thing that everybody always does. And he told the top person, he goes, I worked really hard on this one. I need to work really hard on all these other subroutines, and I can make them all also way faster than the default algorithm. And everything I said will be true. And the person at the top, who really wasn't a computer person, believed him and got all excited and said, okay, so we're going to need a lot of people to do this with you, right? And Karmarkar says, yeah, this is going to be a lot of work. And so that person then immediately said, okay, we're going to hire 200 people to work on this rather than just the 6 people we're currently using. And so that upped it to 200 people. But it was shortly after that, that kind of independent of this story that I'm telling you, I did get an offer to leave this development project, the Corbex project, and actually got an offer to go to Bell Labs, Murray Hill Math Research to do probability again or optimization. But it was the probability side, some of my friends from Cornell on the probability side who got me transitioned up to Bell Labs Murray Hill. So I dropped out of the actual development project fairly early on and just was up at Murray Hill still doing optimization stuff, but also some probability stuff, and was there for a couple of years. And I think we'll get to more parts of that story. So you can ask me more questions now.
Yeah. But that's still incredibly fascinating to hear. I'm not sure if this has been, made public anywhere, but it's unbelievable to learn all of this. So you later publicly objected to allegedly misleading statements made by Karmarkar at the 1988 ISMP in Tokyo. What actually happened?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this, and unfortunately, I don't remember the details, even though I did look at my computer. But I do remember a little bit, but I don't remember the details. But yeah, Karmarkar at that conference was continuing to brag about how fast his code is. And if I remember correctly, I kind of raised my hand and sort of said, no, that's not true, and explained a little bit the stuff that I just said to you here. And everybody there in the audience was kind of on my side. And that was kind of a significant argument that took place there. And the interesting follow-up to that, that then AT&T decided to write an article about exactly the history of this and give credit to everybody who did, Barry Friedman and Mark Meckerton and me and Karmarkar and other people who were working on this. And I think it was David Johnson, I might not be remembering who it was, who was supposed to write this article. And that person interviewed me, that person interviewed Karmarkar, that person, I think, tried to interview Meckerton and Friedman and other people. And some of those people, I think, said no. And the difference in the story between Karmarkar and me was so different that that person didn't know how to write this article. And so it got canceled. And that, by the way, led to arguments between Karmarkar and me at Murray Hill, because now we're in the same building, and he was all very angry with me, and he kind of I want to.
Are you for real?
He didn't touch me, but he was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" It looked like he wanted to fight me.
This is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were unlimited source of surreal stories, and this one is just, mind-boggling. So things almost became physical between you and him at some point.
He looked like he was almost ready to punch me, he did. I did see that expression or that kind of position, but he didn't actually do anything physical. Just like he was so angry, he was just saying things in an angry way, and yeah.
But what was the argument about finally?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I because it's so many years ago, I forget exactly the order in which these things happen. But the basic, the fundamentals of this argument was that he's pissed off that we didn't list him as a co-author on our affine scaling paper, because he's the one who created the affine scaling variant of the Karmarkar algorithm, and thinks that we cheated him because that paper also became quite popular by not listing him as a co-author. And I said, no, Barry Friedman was the one who told us this algorithm. You never said this algorithm to me. And then he told me that he told Barry Friedman the algorithm. And Barry Friedman should have told Mark Meckerton and me that he got this idea from Karmarkar. And I think Barry Friedman never said that to us. I don't know if Karmarkar told Barry Friedman. It's quite possibly true, actually. But we weren't leaving him off because we didn't like him. We didn't know that that he had told Barry Friedman the algorithm. This was some years later. And so he was quite pissed off about that.
Yeah, you did acknowledge him in that paper.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. For the affine scaling variant?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't relook at the paper. Okay. So maybe I did know something, but I didn't know that he got it. I don't remember exactly what we wrote, so I'll have to now go look.
Yeah, but still, just an incredible story. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, by the way, I'll say one more thing.
Yeah.
And this may be more accurate. It wasn't so much who suggested the algorithm. When I had these arguments with him, it was about who did the analysis. It's not a polynomial time algorithm, but we did prove it converges, and did have, this was what the paper was mainly about. If I suggest some interesting thing to you, and then you do the math and understand it and write a paper about it, well, it's nice if you acknowledge me, but you don't have to list me as a co-author just because I suggested it to you. And so in the best world, that would have been just the thing. And it sounds like that's more or less what we did do, although I don't remember that part for sure. What our acknowledgement said.
And do you know why Karmarkar left Bell Labs?
Yes. So, and I forget exactly which year it was, 1990, is that right? Early 1990s, 92? Anyway, I forget exactly what year. He was told that he hasn't published hardly any papers. The paper on his algorithm, he wrote it basically when he was a graduate student or postdoc, and then it became published right around the time he got hired at Bell Labs, or maybe a little bit later. But anyway, right around the time he came to Bell Labs. And then for, that's what, 84, fall of 84. Then from 84 to 90 or whatever, 6 years, he basically wrote only like one or two other papers. And Bell Labs Murray Hill in the Math Research Center, you're judged by your research, the papers that you write. You're expected to write about at least 2 papers a year on average. That's kind of the rule of thumb. And he was basically writing almost 0 papers per year. And so he was told, look, you haven't really done any math research since your famous thing. By the way, he was also very interested in parallel computing. Even though he really never did anything in that direction, he was interested in that direction. And so the people in the math research part at Bell Labs says, we're transitioning you out of the math research into this engineering part where physicists are working on hopefully making parallel computers. Because he was interested in algorithms that you could parallelize and stuff. So it was a little bit of a combination of math and parallel computing. which he was very interested in, but he really wrote no papers, or maybe he wrote one paper about it. But anyway, they transitioned him out of the Math Research Center. And he was so unhappy about that he took a leave of absence to look for a better job somewhere. And this is the interesting thing. Technically speaking, whenever you go on leave of absence, you have to go somewhere. I think you're not supposed to just sit at home. So he got an offer to go to the Institute for Advanced Study here in this place called Princeton, New Jersey. Even though it's not officially part of the university, it's just down the street. And it's where Einstein used to live many years ago. So it's a very famous place. And technically speaking, that's where Karmarkar was for 1 year while he took a leave of absence at Bell Labs while he went on the job market. And the interesting thing is, I have never spoken to anybody anywhere who said, we interviewed him and we didn't make him a job, or we did make him an offer. Never heard anybody, at least in the United States or most of the world, say that they interviewed him for a position. And so at the end of that year, Institute for Advanced Study thing is over. Oh, by the way, another thing. I've never spoken to anybody at the Institute for Advanced Study who said they ever once saw him there. So legally, technically speaking, he was spending his year at the Institute for Advanced Study, but we don't know where he was. He wasn't going around giving interviews, doing interviews and whatever, giving talks. We don't really know where he was. And at the end of that year, he resigned from Bell Labs and moved back to India, where I think in his mind, he was even more famous in India. And he did have some kind of positions, but those, in my understanding, because most of that's in Indian, so I can't really read the web pages, never really transitioned anything really dramatic. But he did have some kind of interactions with I think one of the IITs did have him for a short time. But if you go and look at his Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page about him now, it basically says he has a company in India, or he's associated with a company in India that's into parallel computing. So.
All right. Wow. This is all incredible. Yeah. And why did you leave Bell Labs, and how did you become a faculty member at Princeton?
So I got a phone call from a person named John Mulvey, who's in the office just 2 or 3 doors down from me here. And he called me at Bell Labs Murray Hill and said, Bob, we're looking to hire somebody. And he said that he himself thinks that I'm the right person, because they're looking for somebody who's an optimization person and a person who can teach people how to program computers. Because back in the year 1990, that's when this happened, the department he was in, which back then was called Civil Engineering and Operations Research, which is kind of a weird combo and basically unique. There was no CEOR anywhere else on Earth. But he was an operations research person. And he said, we're in the engineering school here at Princeton. And the engineering school teaches a required course for all students, computer programming. The computer science department refuses to teach it because the computer science department thinks, you want to learn how to computer program, just go down to the Office of Information Technology. They'll teach you how to program. We prove theorems that this algorithm is polynomial, this is n cubed. They're just into proving theorems about algorithms rather than how do you actually write code in Fortran or C or whatever. And so they thought that's just something, if a student needs to do that, you just learn how to do it on your own. But the engineering school disagreed with the computer science department, which is a department in the engineering school. So they had this course, which was taught by the CEOR department. And I forget who was teaching it before they recruited me to teach it. But they said, we need you because the person who was teaching it can't teach it anymore. I forget that person left. I don't remember that part of the history. But you like computer, you're into computer programming. You worked on the Corbix project, and you're an optimization person. So John Mulvey said, I think you're the right person for this position. And so I came for an interview, and they did make me an offer. And this was one of the challenges in my life, because Bell Labs Murray Hill Math Research Center was considered the best place of any place for math. Because if you're at a university, you have to advise students, you have to teach elementary classes, which you might like it, but it's not really adding to your research stuff. So at a university, you spend maybe half of your time, roughly speaking, doing research, and half your time doing teaching and advising and other stuff. Whereas at Bell Labs Murray Hill, you're doing 100% your own, whatever you like, research. And so this was a difficult decision for me because of that, and the fact that I'd never taken a course in civil engineering in my life. Like, ooh, am I going to be comfortable being in a department called Civil Engineering and Operations Research? But I was like, okay, that's just temporary. By the way, that department had only been created about, 8 years earlier. And I'm like, okay, this was just temporary until these two things become big enough, it'll split them up into two departments. So I go, okay, operations research is going to become a department. I do have a master's degree in operations research, so even though it's not pure math, it is okay. And Princeton does seem like a great place. And so I did take a 1-year leave of absence from Bell Labs to come here and just sort of check it out for a year. And I decided I did like it, so I accepted it, and I've been here ever since.
Very interesting. So Bob, I first heard your name about 20 years ago when I learned about the existence of your linear programming book on the internet, although I never owned a copy of it. So I'm curious to know the story behind such a book, which is now in its 5th edition.
Yeah. So I got hired here to teach. By the way, it was mainly to teach the computer programming course. They liked the fact I was doing the research and optimization, but they did have people to teach the optimization stuff. And they liked the fact I did both probability and optimization, by the way. So that was the kind of thing. And so the first few years I was here, I did teach the computer programming course each year. And the other course that I taught was, in those first few years, was probability and sometimes kind of more applied math type things that were being taught. So I liked those things. And then it was 1994 or 5, I forget exactly, when they asked me to teach the introductory optimization class. And I'd never done that. Now I have to do the simplex method. So even though I knew a lot about interior point methods and Karmarkar direction stuff, now I actually have to learn the traditional stuff. And so I asked, what book do you guys teach out of? And Kvatal, I think, was the book that they recommended, they were teaching out of. And so I go, okay, I'll do that. And so it was fun for me to actually learn at a good level the details of the simplex method and variations of the simplex method. There's all kinds of, it's not just one algorithm, by the way, it's kind of a type of algorithm. There's lots of different versions of it. And so learning those things was fun. And I think it was basically, while teaching it the first time, I did have this strong sense that, okay, these books that are just on the simplex method are outdated because interior point methods has really changed. Because now in the mid-1990s, this is 10 years later, interior point methods really were a major thing, even though AT&T wasn't making billions of dollars, but it still was a major thing. And I go, it'd be good to have a book that does the simplex method and interior point methods. And so that's kind of what inspired me. I go, okay, I'll just write a draft of my own thing. And that's how it started. And eventually it did become a book.
Yeah. You came up with the so-called parametric self-dual simplex method. Besides being its creator, what makes this version of the simplex method so special to you?
What makes it so special to me is independent of who thought of it. I would love it no matter where I learned it. I love it because, in my opinion, and I think everybody knew it, they all agree with me, I think it's the simplest and most elegant. Because in the optimization world, you got a primal problem and the associated dual problem. And kind of historically, we think of, okay, the primal problem is my main thing. Oh yeah, mathematically, there's this thing we call the dual, but who cares, if I don't need it. But then mathematicians realized, there's kind of a good connection between the two, and made various versions of the simplex method that would use first the dual method and then the primal method to get to the optimal solution. And then it was something that I kind of thought of while I was learning all these other versions of things, what I call the parametric self-dual, where you're treating both of these as equal all the time, right from the beginning. And by the way, I can say this a little bit in words because I think some of our audience are OR type people. I understand you got an objective function, so you got a bunch of coefficients. If you're trying to maximize, you'd like the current solution to be optimal. Well, to be optimal if all those coefficients are negative, because changing it from all zeros is going to make things worse. So you want all those to be all negative. And you also have to be feasible. So you got a bunch of constraints, a bunch of equations here. And forget about inequality constraints, we'll add a slack variable. So these are all a bunch of equal things. And all the right-hand sides are supposed to be positive, because we're going to set a whole bunch of things equal to 0, and then that new slack variable is equal to that value, and that variable is supposed to be positive. It's only going to be positive if all the right-hand side. So I've got this like a matrix and a row of numbers here and a column of numbers here. I want all those to be negative, all these to positive. Well, let's just perturb all those. Subtract some constant times, some constants, call it mu, from each of these. And let's add mu to each of the right-hand sides. Well, if mu is big enough, it's optimal. But I've changed the problem. It's not the problem I want to solve. Well, okay, let's try to reduce mu. Oh, well, okay, if this is blocking me here. And then a pivot, like the simplex method. You can do a pivot and fix that. And now something else might be a blocking point. When it might be over here, it might be up here. So it can go back and forth and all kinds of random things. It might be a pivot that's a primal pivot. If it's up here, it's a dual pivot that's over here. And this value mu keeps getting, it's an interval. Mu, this version of things is optimal for mu between this value and this value. And that interval keeps starts out from infinity and it comes down. And when 0 is in that interval, now this is optimal even when mu equals 0. That's the original problem. That's your optimal solution. The fact that you got this symmetry and that you're just doing one thing is beautiful, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. That's what I like.
Yeah. And why do you think it's not so popular?
That's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't know the answer to that. If somebody could explain to me, Bob, do this, and people, because I think a lot of people don't even, and you might be able to tell me better. I think a lot of people don't even know this version of the simplex method.
I was not even aware of it. I should be honest, before interviewing you. And I was kind of puzzled why it's not better known as it should.
Yeah, so I've never been a salesman, mm-hmm. as I think I've already said to you. And so I liked it. I think this wasn't, in the first edition of my book, but in more recent editions, it's become a thing that I mentioned, but I didn't really push it because, and I think in my brain, when I was putting it in the book, I was just like, oh, well, whoever sees this is going to understand what I just said to you. And so I didn't think I needed to write, this is going to be the next thing in the future, blah, blah, blah. I did not put a sales pitch for it. I just described this as an algorithm. It's in the book. But, my book isn't the most common book. It's a good book out there, but there are more common books for teaching optimization. And so I think a lot of people just haven't seen it because of that.
Yeah, and you conducted some computational experiments to show that it's actually very decent in practice.
Yeah. That's another fun thing I've done is I've generated like many thousands of random problems and solved it. And I don't have the numbers in front of me and I blank on these things, but it's amazingly, the number of iterations is linear mm-hmm. With size and it's an n squared amount of work. If it's a dense matrix, it's much less than that if it's sparse. So if we're talking dense matrices, it's on average an n cubed algorithm because on average it's just a linear number of iterations. And by the way, when I made a plot of how many iterations it takes as a function of different randomly generated problems in M and N, the rows and columns, it was amazingly close to just a very beautiful, simple formula. And so looking for something like the Klee-Minty problem that makes things go exponential, probably we could find a Klee-Minty version. Maybe we can't. Maybe this is not an exponential algorithm. The Klee-Minty problem, I like to, by the way, say whenever I talk about it, it's in 2 to the n iterations to get there. Maybe it's 2 to the n minus 1, almost 2 to the n, one short, because you got to go around the 2 to the n nodes of a cube, and there's 2 to the n minus 1 edges you have to travel. But the amazing thing is, with the Klee-Minty problem, you can solve that problem in one iteration. Because with that problem, as you're going around this cube, if you just decided with a different way of choosing the entering and leaving variable, go up here. The optimal solution is adjacent in the simplex to the one you start with. You can solve this problem in one iteration instead of 2 to the n operations. And so I think things like the parametric self-dual simplex method are less susceptible to this kind of exponential growth pattern. But I don't think anybody has proved that it's a polynomial time algorithm, but that's still interesting. Hopefully somebody will someday.
Yeah, nice open question. We have to talk about loco. If you replace the Q with the C, it means crazy, like in Spanish.
Yeah, and that's me.
So we have to talk about Loco, which is an optimization software package for solving smooth constraint optimization problems. Tell me the story behind the software, including the motivation behind its name, as well as its capabilities.
Well, let's stick with the name.
Okay.
Loco, linear or quadratic optimization. That was the name that I came up with for my first version of interior point methods. That was more general than just linear programming. And I started doing that. I think I started doing that when I was still at Bell Labs Murray Hill, playing around with these things. So it's affine scaling kind of generalized to the nonlinear world. And so, yeah, when I had that thought, linear or quadratic optimization, and immediately I thought, oh, this is Loco with a Q instead of a C. So that's why I immediately liked it. And it stuck with me. And so that was fun. And it's just basically, as I was saying before, I like computer programming, and the Corbix project disappeared. And so having some code that can solve these problems with interior point methods was just a fun thing for me. And that's why I did it. And so that's kind of how it happened.
Right. So changing topics a bit, around the year 2000, you seem to have developed an interesting map associated with presidential elections, leading you to invent a map based on the concept of Purple America, which went viral in 2004.
Yeah. I'm not really a politics type person, but it was kind of funny. After the 2000 election here in the United States, there was one of the popular magazines, I always forget which magazine it was, U.S. News and World Report, or one of these magazine here in the United States. I might not be saying the right one. Had an article about the election, because whenever there's an election, there's an article about it. And they had a map that they made, which was showing county by county. Every state in the United States is broken up into lots of counties, quite a few counties per state. And they made a map, county by county, showing if it was more than 50% Republican, it was red. If it was more than 50% Democrat, it was blue. So it's a red and blue map. And I'm looking at it and I go, well, here, let me look where I am here. Princeton, I don't live in Princeton. I live 8 miles from here. Where I live is a different county than here in Princeton. In my county, it went Republican. My county was shown red. In Princeton, it went Democrat. Princeton was shown blue. We're just neighbors. It's not that different politically, a little bit different, but not. And so I looked at the numbers. Oh, in my county, it was 52% Republican and 48% Democrat. And in Princeton, it was 52% Democrat and 48% Republican. I'm not saying the exact numbers, but it was kind of in that realm. And I go, oh, that's really weird that we look completely different when we are really almost the same. It would make a lot more sense if we kind of just, instead of painting it either red or blue, let's mix the colors. 52% blue plus 48% red, make the one county that color and do the reverse on it. And so, and because I like computer programming, and because I was able to find the data that was in this article on the internet really quickly, I wrote a computer program in C to make a map where I painted it like those colors. And by the way, this was back when I was teaching this introductory programming course. I'm like, oh, this would be a good final project for my class. So that's part of what inspired me to actually write the code. This seemed like an interesting final project. And so I wrote this code to use it as my final project. And then I made a web page that I put on my, on the web, showing the year 2000, Purple America. This was not a thing. And then 4 years later, or a little bit less than 4 years later, the summer before the next election in 2004, somebody, I don't know who, somewhere saw my webpage and thought it was fascinating, and my webpage went viral. And I have no idea who the first person was that did that, but it became a thing, Purple America. And I've been doing it every 4 years ever since.
Yeah, were you approached by the mainstream press because of that map?
Yes, but this is, of course, 20 years ago, so I don't remember exactly which press companies, but yeah, I did get some approaches because they have to get my permission to show the Purple America. And pretty much all of them have asked for my permission. And I've always just said, yeah, of course you can do that.
Yeah, so now let's talk about your parallel life. In the last 25 years or so, you became a very successful astrophotographer, which is mind-boggling. And how did you get into this field?
So I was interested in astronomy as a kid, like lots of kids are. When you look up at the sky, that's really beautiful. But then my life went in a different direction. Even though when I was a kid, I didn't think I wanted to be an astronomer or I wanted to be an astronaut and go to the moon. I mean, I thought those things were exciting, but this was just when I was a kid. So my life went in a more practical, different direction until December of 1999, when I was chatting with my friend Kirk Alexander. He was not a faculty member here at Princeton. He ran the computer lab here at Princeton, which we used to teach the introductory computer programming course, the course that I taught. So over the course of 9 years, from 1990 to 1999, I would chat with him a lot about the course that I was teaching in the lab. He would come in the lab, I would be in the lab, we'd chat about things. We were friends, but it was 9 years before I actually, went across the hall one day randomly into his office rather than just in the lab. I went, and I don't remember why, to ask him some question, and he was in his office. I go into it, and we're just chatting about something about the computer programming course. And I go, "Oh, Kirk, that calendar on your wall, is that an astrophotograph?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, wow, Kirk, are you interested in astro?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm the director of the Amateur Astronomers Association of Princeton," which, by the way, is not Princeton University. It's just a club in the town of Princeton, New Jersey. And I said, "That's really interesting." I said, "Do you have a telescope?" And he goes, "Yeah, I have a Questar telescope." And when he said that to me, I went crazy, because when I was in high school, I wanted my parents to buy me a Questar telescope. That's considered the Rolls Royce of telescopes. And he has one. And I said, "Oh, that's amazing. I'd love to see it." And he says, "We're having a star party this weekend. You can come out, anybody, it's open to everybody." So I went to the star party. He set up his Questar. I got to look through it. I loved it. Literally about 3 days later, I bought one, but I didn't get it for a few months because you have to order it, a Questar telescope. I got it. I was totally into it, but I did discover an interesting thing pretty early on here, and that is you can't see any of these things like you see these beautiful pictures on calendars and on the internet, these beautiful pictures. You don't see these things visually when you look with your eye into an eyepiece, into a telescope, because these things you're seeing pictures of are very dim things, and the pictures you're seeing are maybe like a 2-hour exposure time. Your eye does a 1/20th of a second exposure over and over again. It's not accumulating that information to get the detailed data of this beautiful picture. By the way, the Questar telescope was great looking at the moon, or looking at Jupiter, or looking at Saturn and seeing its rings. Even that small telescope was really good at that, but it couldn't do anything like all these pictures you're seeing. And so that's when I realized astrophotography is a cool thing. And I like art, and I like beauty, and I like things like that. All my life, that's why I was an oil painter as a kid. I mean, I like things that are beautiful. And so that's what got me excited about astrophotography. I bought a camera. It was about a year or two after I bought my Questar before I actually bought a camera. And I've been doing astrophotography ever since, which has led to some of these books that you mentioned.
Right. And you once told me that understanding astrophotography is also understanding probability theory. Why is that so?
Oh, yeah, that's also really fun for me, because here's the thing. Light travels like it's a wave, but actually it's not just like a wave of water. It's individual particles. But that particle is that one particle is a wave for some reason. This is really mind-boggling, the physics here. This wave, that's just one particle, goes and then, it triggers this pixel in your camera. But now send another wave that's exactly the same. It might trigger not exactly the same pixel. Even if it's coming in the same direction, because it's a wave, you get this wave pattern. And so it's random. Okay, most of the time, that particle, the wave particle, the photon, triggered the main pixel that you would expect it to trigger, but sometimes it triggers this one over here, sometimes this one over here, and also the time interval between it. If you're sent, this is not every 1/1000th of a second exactly another particle is coming out. No, it's random. The time at which a photon gets emitted is random. And so the number of photons that go into a particular pixel is a random variable, and it's understood physically and mathematically what it is. It's a Poisson random variable. And what we ultimately like to know is the mean value of that random variable, because that's really what we're trying to measure, but we're seeing just a random sample of this thing whose mean is something we'd like to know, but we don't know it for sure. And that's why taking longer and longer exposures, you get more and more information. And the random version, when you average it out, gets closer and closer to the actual mean. And so this probability connection between astronomy, I find to be really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it connects with your background in probability too, right?
Yeah.
And how did you combine these two passions of yours, optimization and astrophotography?
Yes. So yeah, this is more than 20 years ago, I got involved in a project here on campus. There was a NASA project to build a space telescope that would be able to take pictures of Earth-like planets around sun-like stars, and hopefully in the future to see if there's life on those planets, because that's the big question. In fact, the first talk I went to that inspired me to be part of this project, the first slide on this talk was, "Are we alone?" That's what inspires not just astronomers, but people all over the world. Are there other beings out there on other planets around other stars who might have already visited us or who might be coming to visit us next week? We don't know. And so that's an incredibly interesting question. And in the early 2000s, NASA was going to build a space telescope to try to be able to directly image planets that are similar to Earth, orbiting stars that are similar to our sun. But even the nearest star is so far away that if there's a Earth-like planet orbiting that star on a camera, even with a big telescope, that planet would be really close. And as I was just saying, not all the light goes into that one pixel, even though technically speaking, that star's diameter in a perfect picture is only about 1,000th the width of a pixel. But it's not all going to go to that one place in that 1/1000th area in that pixel. No, you're going to get something called a point spread function from the wave nature of the light as it goes into your telescope. So understanding the physics of the wave nature of light and the fact that it doesn't all go into one pixel, and that's not completely fixable because it's physics. It's not like you built your telescope badly. It's the physics of light waves, and that star would be 10 billion times brighter than that planet. And so having a thing that's 1/10 billionth as bright, really, really close, that is not easy. And so NASA wanted to get people to figure out a way to make a telescope that could actually do that. Now, as I said, you can't put all that light in that one pixel, but you can change the shape and the look of that distribution of how those photons go that don't go in that central pixel by changing the shape of the front of the telescope. Because that's what you're seeing. Technically speaking, here we go, some math words. The point spread function, the shape of that blob of light that should all be in one pixel, but it's a little bit of a blob, that shape is the square of the Fourier transform of the shape of the opening of the telescope. So places where the light comes in, give it a value 1. Places where light doesn't come in, give it a value 0. That's the shape of the telescope given as a function. Take the Fourier transform of that, take the complex conjugate of that, multiply them together. That gives you a thing, and that tells you the shape of the point spread function. And so the problem that I worked on with two of my colleagues and a bunch of postdocs and graduate students here at Princeton was redesigning the shape. If it's a circle, you just get a circular blob with rings around it, and those rings go out forever, basically. They get a lot dimmer, but you have to go out quite far to get to 10 to the minus 10. But if you change the shape, you can get some dark zones really close to the center. And so I use my optimization tools many times from about the year 2002 to about the year 2012 to design shapes that you would put for a mask that you'd put in front of this round telescope to block some of the light, not all of it. You want most of the light to get in, but to give it's called a shaped pupil, to make it have a certain shape. And then that Fourier transform is different, and you can get some dark zones. And if there's a planet, you might be able to then see it. Sadly, this project got canceled in the year 2008 because there was a thing called a recession, and NASA's budget got cut way back. This is one of the projects that got canceled. But there was another project that got started up a few years later. So there is still work going on in this direction, and still some of the postdocs who used to be here at Princeton who now work at NASA are part of this development project to build and launch a new space telescope, which is launching a few months from now. And it does have a mask that it might not be one that I derived exactly myself, but it's using the ideas that I started, and it's maybe designed by some of the people who were postdocs here, but this is all NASA secret stuff now. But it does have a mask that they're hoping will be able to take pictures of planets around stars. And this telescope that's going to launch in a couple of months is called the
Nancy Grace.
Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, also just known as Roman
Yeah.
Space Telescope. And she's famous, she's a famous astronomer also. Back in many years ago, she was the first lady to do lots of really cool astronomy stuff. So they named this telescope after her.
Yeah, this is real rocket science. Yeah, it's wonderful.
It's been really fun, really fun.
Yeah, and you ended up publishing many papers in the Astrophysical Journal. Why do you think are the main editorial differences compared to regular OR and optimization journals?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that, and it's a hard question to answer. I kind of prefer the math/OR world because I do feel like the people, the referees who are reading it, at least some of the referees are going over the details carefully. Where I feel like in the science/physics/astronomy world, it's more, is this an interesting problem? And they don't go as deeply into it. They kind of trust the authors more, I think. Of course, I don't mind them trusting me, but I don't think it's quite as careful as it is in the math world. It is good, but it's not as careful as in the math world. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, no, I understand. Bob, you co-author a couple of books on astronomy. The first one is called Sizing Up the Universe, The Cosmos in Perspective, published by National Geographic. The book was very well received, with very nice reviews from popular magazines like Time and New Scientist, as well as one from none other than Neil deGrasse Tyson, who said that the book is a feast for the eyes and a banquet for the mind.
Yeah, Neil's a great guy, and he's very funny, and he's nice. He meets with my class every year. I teach a freshman seminar, Sizing Up the Universe, same as the name of one of my books. And he visits us by Zoom, not in person. But he did invite me to visit the planetarium in New York once and give a talk there. So we are friends, but yeah, and co-authors. So the first book that I wrote on astronomy type stuff is joint with Richard Gott by himself. It's called Sizing Up the Universe. And it's a book that's written for the general public, kind of starting with Earth and how do we know it's sphere? How do the flat earthers wrong? Which is kind of fun to think about. And how do we know how far away the moon is and the sun? And how can people, and by the way, this is like my freshman seminar, which is the same thing. How can you or anybody you know do these things themselves? It's not going to Wikipedia and just looking up the answer. It's how can you figure these things out? And most of these things, for only a couple $100 buying a small telescope or something, can do most of what's been discovered at this sort of basic level. Pretty much anybody can figure out that Earth is round, figure out how big the Earth is, figure out how far away the moon is, figure out how far away the sun is, figure out how far away nearby stars are. And then it gets a little bit harder going further out, but even just figuring out how far away a nearby star is pretty amazing because it's really far away. For the nearest star besides our sun is 4 years away if we could travel at the speed of light. If we could travel at the speed of light, the sun is 8 minutes away. And as you all know, we cannot drive to the sun in 8 minutes. So we can convert all these things to miles, and that number is such a big number, I can never even remember it. But the nearest star is we call this light years away. 4 years at the speed, if we could travel at the speed of light. This is really, really far. And these kinds of measurements, people like anybody could spend a little bit of money, buy a small telescope and a camera, and do these calculations. And I have taken a picture of the sun setting on Lake Michigan and noticed, I got very lucky, by the way. This was not something I did as a project. I was just at a random dinner event overlooking Lake Michigan and saw the sun setting and ran down with a camera, took a picture, looked at the picture. There was no smear. Usually when you see a sun setting over a lake, you see a smear because of the waves. Well, Lake Michigan is not a small lake. It's a big thing. And it doesn't have tides like from the oceans. It's just a lake. And if there's not much wind, it can be very smooth. And by the way, as we discussed before, having a boat, I can tell you, maybe at the shore, you kind of see bumps from the water kind of coming up by the shore. But if you're out there a couple miles, it's just like flat. It's just like a mirror. And I took this picture and there was no smear. And I go, oh my God, this is beautiful. And then I zoomed, and this was an inexpensive little point and shoot camera. I zoomed in just looking at this little camera. Go, wow, that's amazing, because here's the horizon. The sun is setting. It's like 2/3 down, and I'm seeing its reflection. So the sun and its reflection. And then I looked at it and go, the reflection's a little bit compressed. It's not only is it not a smear, it's compressed. That makes no sense. Is there something wrong with my camera? Oh, wait a minute. The mirror is not flat. Earth is round. I spent a week of my time doing the geometry and the trigonometry to analyze this picture. The one thing I didn't know is how high was my camera above the water, because this was not an experiment I was doing, but okay, it was 5, 6, 7 feet above the water. Who knows exactly? But I estimated the size of the Earth from that picture, and the right answer corresponds to, I think, 5'6" above the water, which is about the right answer, about how high I was. And so that's one of my published papers. And so, and the other one I like to mention to people is, how do we tell the flat earthers they're wrong? Go back 100,000 years, or even 200,000 years. There were people just like you and me. They didn't have cameras. They didn't have paper and pencil, and they didn't go to college, but their brains were just as smart as us. And they were mostly living outdoors. And living outdoors, seeing the sun and the moon, they would see multiple lunar eclipses in their life. The moon, it's a full moon, it's a full moon, it's a full moon. Then, oh wait, now it's not. There's a little notch out of it. Oh, now it's bigger notch, bigger notch. Oh, now the moon's, that's called a lunar eclipse. I think billions of people over hundreds of thousands of years have seen that and made the mental obvious thing, that is our shadow, because the sun was setting and there's, the sun was going down, now the moon's coming up. That's probably our shadow. Not everybody thought of this, but billions and billions of people, I don't know the numbers, biologists probably could tell us how many humans have ever existed, but I think 1% of all humans who've ever existed who used to live outdoors, probably, or maybe 0.1% looked and had this thought, that's our shadow, and it looks round. But then, of course, a flat earther might say, oh, this also looks round, but it's not a sphere.
Yeah.
But okay, if Earth was like this one time, casting its shadow on the moon, well, another time the moon's over here. Well, the angle would be different. And these same people saw these shadows of the Earth on the moon multiple times in their lives because they were living outdoors, and it always looked round. I think hundreds of thousands of people knew that Earth was a sphere, but they didn't publish it. They didn't get credit for it. But I really do believe that many, many people had that thought. And by the way, people today, a flat earther, I could say, go out and look at a lunar eclipse. And now a year later, look at another lunar eclipse over here. How can they both look like that if what you're telling me that the Earth is a flat thing is correct? I'd like to have this conversation with them, but I don't.
So all of this motivated you to write that book?
Yeah, all this motivated the book. And it goes beyond just these two. This is how it starts, but it goes all the way out to the Big Bang. We talk about how all these facts and sort of on a simple level, how these things are determined. It's not just you go look up. This is how it was done. And if you want, you can learn to do it also.
Very nice. And your next astronomy book, called Welcome to the Universe in 3D, a visual tour, includes Neil deGrasse Tyson as co-author, which ended up becoming a New York Times bestseller. How did you guys meet, and how did this collaboration come about?
Welcome to the Universe in 3D with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil deGrasse Tyson used to teach here at Princeton. He was not a faculty, he just co-taught a course. I don't remember the details of what his ranking was, but he co-taught the Intro Astro course here at Princeton for a number of years. And he co-taught it with two other people, one whose name is Michael Strauss, and one whose name is Richard Gott. So the three of my co-authors here used to teach the introductory course here at Princeton for a number of years. I first saw Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was teaching that class, because he was kind of becoming a famous person even beyond this class. And so I went to one of his lectures once, and it was fun just to hear him speak. And he was funny. But he and the other two co-authors wrote a book, a textbook for this class. The intro class in astronomy here at Princeton is a book that the three of them wrote, published by a publisher called Princeton University Press, which, by the way, is quite interesting because it's not part of Princeton University. It's an independent company called Princeton University Press. And they wrote a book called Welcome to the Universe. I figure there's some subtitle for the introductory, the textbook. But then some years later, they decided to make a 3D version, Welcome to the Universe in 3D. Because Richard Gott and I are totally into stereoscopic viewing of things and 3D things. Even in our first book, we have some pages that are 3D pictures where you look at it and do your eyes correctly so that your left eye sees this version, your right eye sees this version, your brain sees it in 3D. And so they're going to write a book, and they invited me to be part of it because Richard Gott told the other two that I'm the one who made the 3D pictures in our book. And so they invited me to be a co-author on that, which was really fun. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson was great at making it a very popular book. So that was awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Wonderful story. And when the book was released, Neil promoted it as a guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The very next day, the book became the #1 bestseller among all books on Amazon.com. How did that feel?
It felt amazing. I mean, amazing. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson is very interesting and funny and smart. I mean, he's really smart. And by the way, one little funny story here, and I think you already know this. He's on the show to sell the book, and he mentions Michael Strauss and he mentions Richard Gott, but he didn't mention me. And he sent me a big apology the next day. But the reason he didn't mention me is not his fault. Colbert was learning how to use it. This is a book to look at things in 3D. I don't know if you can see me doing this. You open up the book, and the book has this thing in the back here, which has lenses in it, and you put this lens up to your face, and then you turn the page to look at something you want to see, because on the page, there's two things in every page, and these lenses allow your left eye to see the one on the left, and your right eye to see the one on the right, and when I'm looking at this, it looks beautiful 3D as I'm looking at it right now, and Neil is explaining this to Colbert, and Colbert has a book, and he's trying to do it, and Colbert is trying to do it while Neil is describing the book and mentioning the co-authors, and he's mentioned the first co-author, the second co-author, and he's just about to say my name when Colbert interrupts him because he's having a little bit of trouble. He's a little bit confused about how to do this. He's asking for some advice, and so Neil gives him advice on how to do that, and then he forgot to go back and and the list of the three people's names.
Yes, I watched that twice actually, and it felt so frustrating because it was someone from our community, an optimization person was about to be cited there in a very famous show, and suddenly Stephen Colbert just interrupts Neil and things went elsewhere. Yeah, it was very frustrating. Anyway, after publishing this book, someone by the name of Brian May from a band called Queen contacted you. Please share this unbelievable experience with us.
Okay. Yes, I did have an interaction with Brian May. He was a graduate student at, I think, University College London, if I remember correctly, back, 30, 40 years, when he was young. And he was almost done getting his PhD in astronomy. Almost done. But then Freddie Mercury started this rock band called Queen. And I don't exactly know the personal connections the two of them had, but Freddie Mercury convinced Brian May to drop out of graduate school, or postpone graduate school, to join the rock band for a while. And I think Brian May thought this was going to be kind of a temporary-ish thing, although I might not be saying that quite accurately. But anyway, he postponed his PhD, joined Queen. This postponed things for a few decades. And then, of course, Freddie Mercury sadly passed away quite young. But then Brian May, at some point around 2007 or 8, I forget the exact year, thought, I never finished my thesis. I wonder if my thesis advisor is still around. Is he still alive? Is he still at the university? And he did the investigation, and he was. And so Brian May messaged him and said, I'd love to finish my thesis. Is that okay? And his advisor said, yeah, you can do that. And so around 2007, 8, I forget the exact year, he did finish his thesis, got his PhD in astronomy. He's an astronomer and a rock band musician, a famous one. And so that's cool. And so he still likes astronomy. And by the way, he likes 3D stuff. He has a publishing company that publishes books in 3D. In fact, I think I have one right here. There you go. What is it called? Cosmic Clouds in 3D, written by David Eicher's the main person, but creative director, it says here, is Brian May. And Brian May owns the company that published this book. Brian May created the company that published this book and a bunch of other books.
Very cool.
Yeah. And so after our book came out, A Welcome to the Universe in 3D, he sent an email message to Michael Strauss, who, by the way, currently and has been for many years, the chair of the astrophysics department here at Princeton. And Brian May sent him a message saying, oh, I see you have this book. It's in 3D. I'm totally into 3D stuff. I'd love to publish another book, a 3D book with you guys. My understanding is you made the pictures in this book. Would you be interested in doing a project with me? And Michael Strauss wrote back and said, I made no pictures in our book. Bob Vanderbei did. And he may have CC'd me on that. And anyway, but Brian May then contacted me, and we did have a back and forth over the course of about a year, including one Zoom meeting, but lots of emails about maybe doing a book together. But it's kind of on pause or on hold or whatever. It's not happening right now, largely because I didn't know what to do that's not already done in here. Because it's a challenge. And we had a bunch of discussions, he and I, and it just was hard for me to figure out what to do. And so that's why it kind of hasn't gone anywhere.
This is just amazing.
Yeah.
I envy you. I wish I had a chance to talk to him. And you actually reached out to him years ago before this.
That's right. So he didn't really remember that when he wrote Michael Strauss. But it is true that when he got his PhD back around 2008, and I think this became in the news a little bit later, and when I heard about this, and I can't remember if it also said he's interested in 3D stuff. I don't remember if that was part of that first conversation. But the fact that he got his PhD in astronomy totally fascinated me and Richard Gott. And I did send him an email message saying, I'm interested in astronomy too. And he did respond to me briefly, but we didn't have a long back and forth. So that was
very cool.
Also.
Yeah. Brian May is one of my heroes because of his unique background in music and science.
Yeah.
So while you were busy doing all this work on astrophotography and optimization, you found time to co-write a book on real and convex analysis. What motivated you to write such a book?
Being asked to do it by my former colleague, who's still alive, but he's pretty old now in an assisted living place. His name's Erhan Cinlar. He's the one who tried to recruit me to Northwestern, and I turned it down and went to University of Illinois. He then, a few years later, came to this place called Princeton, and he was part of the recruiting process to get me to come here. So even though I mentioned John Mulvey, Erhan Cinlar also was recruiting me to come here. And so I came, and as I already said, in those first few years, I mostly did math-type classes here at Princeton, even though we were in the engineering school. And so Erhan Cinlar and I both taught some of these kind of intro math for engineers type courses for a few years. And it was Erhan who thought, we're having fun doing this. And he and I did it a little bit differently from each other. And so he said it'd be fun to jointly write a book, sort of bringing the two perspectives together. And so that's kind of what inspired us to write that book.
Got it. And what are your views regarding AI and the academic world?
I'm somewhat optimistic, even though most people are very pessimistic. And the way I like to say this is, I think all through history, when new technology is invented, people worry that it's going to destroy the lives of people who are involved in the older technology, whether it's in creating this thing called a car, and people who raise horses are no longer going to have a job. All through history, I think people are worried about this evolution into more advanced thing. Now, this is a big evolutionary event. From horses to cars, I think was kind of a big one, but not as big as this one. And there were lots of other ones. I mean, when I was in high school, there was a new invention that everybody talked about for many years: calculators. Students aren't going to learn how to do arithmetic anymore. People won't know what 6 times 8 is anymore. They're going to have to type it on their computer, on their calculator. People were really worried about that. Do people talk about that a lot nowadays? Not really. We just adjusted to it. And I mean, we do have rules. You can't take a calculator into the class when you're into your exam, when you're taking an exam or this or that. You can't bring your phone nowadays. You can't bring your cell phone with you into the class when you're doing an exam because you might look something up by Googling it. We have rules to adapt. And every time things change, we worry about how it will adapt and will we adapt well enough. But all through history, I feel like we have adapted well. I'm quite excited about this newer evolution of things. I do have lots of back and forth with ChatGPT and Gemini, and not so much Claude, but a little bit with Claude. And I do find them very useful. And by the way, I always check what they say because it's not always right. Even when I'm talking to my colleagues down the hall here and we talk about math things, they don't always say things that are right. You have to be thoughtful and see if you understand it. And if you don't, get it explained better and somebody might be wrong. I think having these kind of conversations with a computer isn't that different from having these conversations with another person. And, by the way, I've been Googling things for 20 years. It used to be I would go to the library and find a book that explains these things. And 20 years ago, when Googling things became a thing, you just type a little question to Google and web pages would be popping up, recommendations, look here, look here. And I feel like this modern era isn't that much different from that. Except for rather than me figuring out which one to click on, it summarizes the information for me already.
Yeah.
So I'm relatively optimistic, but we do have to be careful and adapt correctly. I do agree.
Yeah. I'm more worried about the youngsters. As long as they keep their critical thinking there, they can do awesome things with it.
I do, by the way, I think critical thinking is something evolutionarily. We've evolved over hundreds of thousands or even more years. Our brains aren't going to change in a week from now or a year from now. Their ability to do things, the level of curiosity isn't going to change. And so I think that having these extra tools is just kind of a tool. It's not going to get rid of our ability to think about things intelligently.
Right. Bob, you used to go to church every Sunday when you were a kid, then fast forward into the future, and you spent more than 1/3 of your life taking pictures of the heavens. That being said, are you a religious person?
I wish I was, but I'm not. I do really think that it's amazing that you exist. Oh, and that I exist. And that people exist. And that creatures exist. And that plants exist on our planet. When I was young, it was just, becoming part of this whole thing. But as I think about these things and have been aware of these things over many decades, it is more and more amazing to me. And I personally think that kind of thought process that I'm explaining is what inspired some people to think, we were created by God or whatever, and create these religions. And it's happened in multiple ways in different parts of the world. But I think it's kind of all inspired in the same basic sense that it's amazing that we even exist. How can this possibly be? Somebody must have created this. But personally, when I have that thought process, I'm like, if there's a God, who created the God? I mean, that's even more amazing. If this God thing can create a universe in like a split second, well, that's even more amazing. Who created that? So it's amazing that we're here. It's always going to be amazing. I think that inspired the creations of religions. But to me personally, the religion doesn't explain, doesn't answer the fundamental question.
Yes.
Why does all this exist?
Uh-huh.
So, and growing up in Western Michigan, everybody went to church. My parents went to church. they weren't seriously religious, but that's just part of the culture. Everybody goes to church. And so I did go, and I did try to believe it. And I was a member of the Christian group when I was in college for a while, because I tried to believe in these things. But at some point, as I kind of in this perspective that I was just saying, I found it hard to imagine. And a lot of religious people say they feel like they're talking to God. They pray and they feel like they got an answer. Somehow, when I would pray, I never felt like I got an answer. I'm just doing what I'm told to do, kind of thing. So, but a lot of people do feel like they're hearing from God. And if I did have that feeling, I would be a religious person. And I don't know why I don't. Other people do. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I understand that. That itself is a question, right? Why certain people are religious, why other people are not, and so I think it's a very deep and fundamental question. It's not very easy to answer.
Yeah,
and
it really is.
And Bob, do you have any regrets?
Regrets? Not that I can think of. I have some egrets, but they're in my backyard.
All right. Yeah. And what are your plans for the future?
Nothing specific, just enjoying life. Hope to live forever, but sadly, that's not going to happen. I do also think about that a lot, that maybe 100 years from now, we'll have figured out how to make humans live maybe 200 years old, or maybe even forever. Biology and science is advancing in such a rapid pace right now that we're probably not lucky enough to get that big benefit, but maybe our children will. And that's interesting, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. And so I'll just try to enjoy my last 20 or whatever years.
Yeah, right. And would you like to leave a takeaway message for the younger generation of optimizers?
Learn calculus. Enjoy it. It's fun. There it is. There's the minimum.
That's actually a very good advice.
Yeah. And this whole world is using sort of elementary kind of optimization algorithms to just, I mean, I can talk to my phone and it knows what I said. That was not something we even imagined would be doable in my lifetime when I was young. We were hoping that it would be doable, but it's just on my phone now. When I was young, we were hoping that some big computer in a room might be able to do this. It's amazing how things have changed in my lifetime, and it will probably, hopefully, be equally amazing in my children's and their children's lifetimes as well. And it's just hard to even imagine what things will be like.
Yeah. All right, Bob, thank you very much for your time. It was really amazing to talk to you. You, as I said earlier, you are an endless source of surreal stories, and I was just thrilled to learn about all of them. So thank you very, very much for your time.
Oh, this was really, really fun. It was so much fun to talk to you. It's great. We'll talk again sometime soon.
Yeah, and if you are interested in doing some observations here in the southern hemisphere, just let me know. Maybe we can find a good spot for you to point your telescope and take some nice photos from the sky.
Okay, I'm coming.
Yeah. Okay, Bob. Take care of your health, and I hope that you stay really active in the next 20 plus years and that you keep on producing nice things for us. All right. So.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
So bye, Bob. Ciao.
Bye.